we're back on the revolution. Ellie's gonna do it with me today because we had a couple of stories in the rundown that I thought that kind of fits pretty into this show, and I'll tell you why. So we're gonna do the one on Hugh Hefner. You're thinking, what does that have to do with the revolution? So as you're gonna see, the thrust of this story is about what the government refused to do, and I think it's actually super telling for why we need a political revolution, because the government clearly doesn't work for us. Okay, now having said that, let me start it off for you guys, okay? So apparently the FBI has been sitting on a tip on Epstein for over 15 years. And who gave him that tip? Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine. That is so interesting. It turns out one of his Playboy bunnies was abused when she was younger by Epstein. But the FBI chose not to do anything about it. That is fascinating. So let's find out more about this story. Elliot.
Yeah, so Hugh Hefner, the late founder of Playboy magazine, reportedly informed the FBI that a Playboy Playmate had been sexually abused and trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and others in his circle. But according to court records, the FBI did sit on that for 15 years, despite Hugh Hefner repeatedly contacting the FBI. Back in 2005, Audra Christensen, then a Playboy model, told Hefner that she was an Epstein survivor and asked that he be the one to reach out to the FBI because he has more status and they would be more likely to take him seriously than her. The details of the alleged abuse appear in a legal complaint against the United States filed by 34 Epstein survivors and was reported on by Miami Herald reporter Julie K. Brown via her Substack column. The court document also said the FBI claimed they would follow up on Christensen's claims, but it wasn't until October 2020 when they actually reached out. The FBI exhibit stated that Christensen said shortly after meeting Epstein, before she knew it, she was naked and raped by Epstein and then trafficked for 10 years. The complaint alleges the FBI did not investigate the model's claim, and by not doing, quote, violated mandatory policies and protocols requiring it to investigate claims like Ms. Christensen's of child sexual abuse and trafficking, and failing to investigate credible tips such as Ms. Christensen's allegations, the FBI created a foreseeable zone of risk to future victims of Epstein's sex trafficking enterprise, including plaintiffs. The FBI is trying to make the case go away. They are saying that the 34 Epstein survivors did not file in time, apparently, because the cases happened between 1997 and 2017. Hefner has also obviously come under scrutiny in the past. He had a 2016 lawsuit claiming that he allowed Bill Cosby to sexually abuse a model in the Playboy Mansion, and a 2022 documentary series claimed that he actually himself coerced and drugged women at the Playboy Mansion. But this is also not the first time that the FBI allegedly ignored complaints by Epstein survivors. For decades, Epstein raped and trafficked young women and children. As early as 1996, victim Maria Farmer, who worked for Epstein, told the FBI that Epstein was abusing children and had child pornography. FBI reports made public earlier this year show that Ms. Farmer filed complaints against him and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, and that the FBI not only failed to investigate, but for years failed to acknowledge or act upon Ms. Farmer's complaint. And so speaking with NewsNation, Eric Fudali, a lawyer representing Epstein survivors, said the latest reporting about the FBI ignoring complaints about Epstein in 2005 are devastating but not surprising. Law enforcement has failed Epstein survivors for decades and continues to do so today at the highest level. So Cenk, for as far as I can tell, the word that comes to mind is power, and it seems like this is a great example of the FBI and much of our government and our law enforcement favoring those that have power and wealth rather than actual victims. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a super important lesson in here about our government. I'm gonna come back to that because I have a personal story about the Playboy Mansion. Okay, so, and it's related to this. So let me start that out by noting that the couple articles I read all mentioned, on the other hand, Hugh Hefner is the real problem. You know, with the Playboy Mansion was a problem and Cosby was a problem. And I was like, okay, I could see that being mentioned in an article, but it does seem like they're also attacking Hugh Hefner for trying to help this woman who was sexually abused when she was a minor, right? Okay, but that's a minor note, right? But then I thought, wait, I know those stories, and what Cosby did was terrible, for example. And so And then I thought, well, okay, if Hugh Hefner knew about Bill Cosby, and we don't know that he did for a fact, and all the other charges are correct, how bad was what Epstein did to this woman that even Hugh Hefner was like, whoa, 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 and called the FBI several times. Aren't you gonna do something about this? So it's not, and you even put aside the allegations. The Playboy Mansion was not known for over-regulation on sexual dalliances, right? And for the guy who heads the Playboy Mansion to go, no, this is way out of bounds, right? And the FBI was still like, nah, okay. Now, what's my personal story is a kind of a funny part of this, but so me and my wife, we like to go to open houses in LA to houses we cannot possibly afford. Shh, don't tell them. Okay, and so we went to this open house in Beverly Hills area, right? And it's close to the Playboy Mansion, and everybody like Playboy Mansion is a well-known house, like all the celebrity guys and stuff, etc. And then we go to the open house, and they're like, "Oh, this was part of the Playboy Mansion facility, right?" And a lot of their guests would stay here. Now, this is before the Cosby scandal, right? And so they took us to different parts, and then they're like, "This is the room Bill Cosby used to stay in," and they explained, "Oh, Cosby would come over all the time, and he liked the girls here and stuff." And at the time, we didn't think anything of it, right? Later, when the Cosby stories broke, I was like, "Oh, that's what was happening in that room." Okay,
Whoa.
Okay, so. Man, and those places were spectacular and large and wealthy and had all these women and all that stuff going on. Again, that's why Hugh Hefner going ballistic over what happened to this Playboy model is really interesting. Now, most interesting is the FBI reaction, obviously. So I'll give you a timeline here. Hefner reports this in 2005. Epstein is arrested in 2006. The FBI knows this information about him, chooses not to investigate. And then in 2008, they do a plea deal that was basically a slap on the wrist. They have overwhelming evidence that this guy is involved in a huge, criminal enterprise of peddling these girls. We cover that story because we're ancient and have been around since the beginning of time. And I was like, wait, these charges are microscopic. What the hell's going on here? He was with underage girls. Turns out they're powering down on purpose. So the FBI chose not to investigate all of these different crimes that he did, and they gave him a sentence that was so light that he was basically treating the prison as a hotel. He would only come at night, and he was allowed to go and do business during the day, and God knows what else. And then he'd come and sleep at the prison, and then wake up in the morning and go back to his mansion. That's not a prison sentence, and it lasted for a tiny amount of time. And by the way, the guy who made that deal with him, the prosecutor at the time, just happened to become the Secretary of Labor for Donald Trump in his first term, Alex Acosta, even though he doesn't know anything about labor. What a coincidence that the guy who did the sweetheart deal for Epstein winds up becoming a cabinet secretary. Now, back to the timeline, you get the slap on the wrist in 2008. Now, Epstein is arrested again in 2019, the final time, and the FBI still doesn't respond to Hefner and finally gets to it in 2020 after Epstein's dead. And then at that point, they're like, oh, well, you know what? I guess he committed suicide in prison, and so now we don't have to investigate it.
Yeah, they're saying that, and they're also going, oh, well, also you didn't file in time. It's like, well, you had 15 years to actually look into these claims, and you never once did that. There's also this week, a federal judge is threatening to basically follow through with contempt proceedings for Department of Justice lawyers who are still not releasing documents related to Epstein or explaining all of the redactions that they made originally. And he's basically going, I'm gonna ruin your careers because you need to be forthright and we need to actually get some justice going on here. So I think this story is something that might have happened, throughout the past 25 years, but it's clearly still going on every day, and it's pretty pretty gross. And to your point about how bad could Epstein possibly be if Hugh Hefner is the one, who's basically reporting it. Yeah, also Epstein has also not said nice things about Trump. So you could also ask, how bad does Trump have to be for Epstein to go, hey, this guy doesn't have a good cell in his body? But all of this, I think, is about power structures, and it's just another example of how victims get screwed over time and time again because powerful people have deep pockets.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I think our government doesn't work for us. So that's the FBI purposely not investigating, guys. Think about the ramifications of that. They know that Epstein is raping underage girls, and they let him do it for decades. Meanwhile, the CIA did a deal with Epstein all the way back in the 1980s during the Iran-Contra affair. Epstein basically laundered one of the planes that they were using to bring drugs in, and he bought it for Victoria's Secrets, and the owner of Victoria's Secret was his benefactor, and the Israelis were involved, of course. Okay, but the important part of that is the CIA definitively knew who Epstein was and that he was doing nefarious things. The FBI knew and chose not to investigate him. Did the CIA tell them not to investigate him? Probably, but it doesn't really matter, because what matters most is our government collectively allowed Epstein to rape underage American girls for decades, and they've been covering it up to this day. So who does our government actually work for? Because it definitely doesn't work for us, and that's pretty haunting.
Yeah, there's also, another sad element to it is the fact that she had to go to Hefner and say like, hey, can you do this on my behalf? Because she inherently knew that she wasn't gonna be taken seriously. And I think that's an important thing to remember, especially as we head into midterms in these next elections and people are reflecting on things like the Me Too movement. Yeah, there's a culture that these people are aware of where they know that they're gonna get screwed over and they have to go to someone that they know is gonna be taken more seriously. And then sometimes things are so bad that they're still not taken seriously, even when they get someone who, for all intents and purposes, should be actually considered legit by those that are in power. So it's a very emblematic of, I think, a very sad time in our culture.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say the last two things on it because it's infuriating, and that's why, like, mainstream media keeps saying, like, why are people so animated by this? It's just one issue, and then like the Ben Shapiro's of the world are like, move on, move on, move on, right? And so why is this so animating? Are you crazy? First of all, it involves raping underage kids. How could you not understand why we'd be animated? But secondly, if our government isn't working for us, that's not a small thing. That's a giant thing. And so don't tell me that it's not important or interesting. And what happened? Half the files got released, or some portion of the files got released because of the heroic work of Ro Khanna and Tom Massey. But then they chose not to release the rest, and that's illegal. And now everybody's just letting it go. Government's saying, move on, don't talk about it. Half the media is saying, move on, don't talk about it. And now the government should be prosecuting the executive branch for not releasing the files. They passed the law. Donald Trump signed it. It was nearly unanimous. It is not in dispute. They must release the rest of the Epstein files. And once again, the same government who told us, oh, Epstein committed suicide. It was just a coincidence that the guards were on break, the video cameras weren't working in the hallway, and there was two different sets of nooses that he was using to kill himself. The one he used to kill himself, the one he left behind.
Because sometimes you got a Tuesday noose and a Thursday noose,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Go into the closet and pick one
Yeah,
up.
oh, and you got to accessorize and stuff. So
cool.
Who's powerful enough to kill Epstein in jail and have the US government protect them? So obviously our government is compromised. We have to do something about it. We have to get, for the first time in our lifetime, an honest president who's actually gonna represent us and find out who's been scheming against us, screwing us over, and literally raping our kids and in charge of our government. That is not a small thing, that is gigantic. So no matter how much the press and Trump and the people in power want us to forget about the Epstein files, we're never going to forget. Okay, We're out of time. Thank you so much, Elliot. Really appreciate it, and thank you for staying over to do this with us. Now you are part of. Now you're in trouble because you're part of the people who started a political revolution.
Oh, heck yeah. I've been being accused of that for a while. Let's do it, y'all. So that's very exciting.
All right, love it. All right, guys, for the members, I'm gonna come back. And I'm gonna read some of your great comments left over from the show. You could also write in, and if you want to ask me questions too while we do the bonus episode for the members. So if you want to become a member, hit the join button below on YouTube or tyt.com/join. And yes, on Monday, Anna's back. We'll see you then.